In 1984, Jeffrey Katzenberg joined Michael Eisner and Frank Wells to form the new guard of the Walt Disney Company. As chairman of film production, Katzenberg was tasked with reviving Disney's ailing feature division, with a strong focus on the animation studios, which were at an all-time low. Despite a controversial and ruthless leadership, Katzenberg's tenure was legendary, jettisoning the studio into their Renaissance era, helping turn the studio into the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate it is today. In 1994, however, Katzenberg was forced to step down from the studio when the sudden death of Wells brought growing tensions on the executive team to a head. Only days after, Katzenberg approached film director and producer Steven Spielberg and music executive David Geffen, proposing the opening of a new film studio which would produce both live-action and animated films. In October of 1994, DreamWorks was officially founded, with Katzenberg in charge of animation. Forming a co-production deal with computer animation company Pacific Data Images, DreamWorks went full steam ahead into production on both traditionally and CG animated pictures. Katzenberg recruited various Disney animation staff, and Spielberg brought over his entire team of artists from his soon-defunct Amblimation. DreamWorks' first feature film, CG animated Ants, released in 1998 to reasonable success, though it was that year's traditionally animated feature, The Prince of Egypt, that proved the studio had major potential. Following in 2000, DreamWorks released The Road to El Dorado, another reasonable success, and the phenomenal Chicken Run, co-produced with British stop-motion studio Aardman. DreamWorks' first groundbreaking success, however, was 2001's Shrek, a film which directly targeted Disney's fairy tales, broke numerous box office records, and won the very first Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, beating out Disney and Pixar's Monsters, Inc. With this huge success, DreamWorks vowed to stick exclusively to CG animation following the completion of two in-production features, 2002's Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, and 2003's Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. In 2004, DreamWorks officially spun off its animation division into the publicly traded DreamWorks Animation, releasing Shrek 2 and Shark Tale as the first two films under the banner. In this video, we'll look at the first 10 years of DreamWorks Animations, as I break down the studio's 9 foundational films and rank them in order of my own personal preference from least to most favourite. At that, this is my ranking of DreamWorks Animation's foundational years. Kicking us off at number 9, Shark Tale. DreamWorks' first misfire, and an incredibly annoying movie. While it has a decent premise, its narrative storytelling is incredibly bland. Because every character is so infuriatingly irritating, it's hard to find anyone to root for. Even the hero, Will Smith's Oscar, is a huge jerk who you just can't wait to see fail. As a C-set parody of gangster flicks, even reeling in an uninterested De Niro and a confused Scorsese into the cast, there are an exhausting number of spoofs of Godfather, Goodfellas, Scarface, and Jaws. Sadly, this comedy simply isn't funny at all. I hate being harsh on 20-year-old animation, but when you compare Shark Tale's visuals to those of Pixar's Finding Nemo, released only a year earlier, it's easy to see which is the least attractive. And all this time later, Shark Tale's style, music, and pop references are just extremely dated. What was cool, or an attempt to be cool, in 2004 is a total cringe fest now. 8. Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. With DreamWorks still carving a unique space in Hollywood, 6 movies in, they continued to break barriers with this boldly original melodrama. Attempting to tell a talking animal story without the usual formula and tropes, or even the talking animals, Spirit takes the form of a semi-silent feature, told simply through music and sparing dialogue. While the main character may not talk, his inner thoughts are sporadically provided via a dull and monotonous narration by Matt Damon. Likewise, Bryan Adams' droning love ballad-drenched soundtrack doesn't fit the film's sprawlingly epic nature, nature, nor its stunning and vivacious animation. The accompanying overlong montages make the movie a slog despite its brisk pace. Hans Zimmer delivers a wonderful score, however, which blends beautifully, allowing for a number of mesmerizingly euphoric moments. Props to the movie for its audaciousness, though despite best efforts, Spirit ends up a somewhat tedious adventure. 7. Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. DreamWorks turned to silver screen hero Sinbad for this 2003 flick, likely to capitalize on Disney's recent pulp adventures Atlantis and Treasure Planet. The Mouse House had actually planned a Sinbad production in the early 90s under Katzenberg's watch. As such, Sinbad is the most Disney-esque picture of the DreamWorks canon, with a visual style indistinct from their output at the time. Sinbad boasts stunning hybrid animation. It soars with its traditional work, some of the best from any studio at the time, though crashes with its CG work, with monsters and fantastical creatures a real eyesore 20 years later. It does boast electrifying, swashbuckling sequences and exhilarating action-adventure, feeling like an animated Pirates of the Caribbean. Despite mostly gorgeous visuals, Sinbad sadly offers a formulaic run-of-the-mill story. It is, however, fun and enjoyable for the most part. 6. Ants. DreamWorks kicked off their age of animation with a small-scale dramedy about bugs. Similarly, in the same year, Pixar rolled out their own, A Bug's Life. In fact, both movies likely spawned from the same story treatment being shopped around at Disney during Katzenberg's tenure there. Of course, Bug's Life reigned champion at the box office, showcasing better animation and characters. To my surprise, however, Ants, despite its incredibly primitive animation, has held up quite well all these years later, and dare I say it, perhaps even better than Bug's Life. It remains an understated movie with a small story but huge amounts of heart and incredible imagination. It develops these ideas of bugs' lives in a grander, more epic and existentially deeper way, with an enormous cast delivering great performances, plenty of big laughs, and tons of exciting sequences. Ants is a movie that deserves reassessment. 5. The Road to El Dorado. What begins as a high-octane, pulp-fueled action-adventure romp soon becomes a fantastic exploration of friendship and acceptance. Unfortunately, the two leads are somewhat unlikable, and their plight becomes less interesting or redeemable and more predictable as the movie goes on. The movie is aided by a great soundtrack by Elton John and Tim Rice, and a tremendous score by Hans Zimmer, bringing the Lion King trifecta back in full force, though the songs are nowhere near as memorable as those in the Disney classic. Regardless, El Dorado sports insanely superb animation, which is vivaciously radiant and full of life, beautifully blending traditional stylings with CG elements. It could be one of DreamWorks' best looking movies and one of the most beautiful of the medium period. 4. The Prince of Egypt. One of the most lavish, epic, and gorgeously grandiose animated features of all time, The Prince of Egypt is easily DreamWorks Animation's traditionally animated masterpiece, only 2 movies in, cementing the studio as a force to be reckoned with. Essentially an animated remake of the Ten Commandments, following the tales of Moses from the Bible's Book of Exodus, the movie manages to balance biblical storytelling with whimsy and fantasy, told through a stunning visual style, making not only for a respectful but widely accessible adaptation. At the centre is a heartfelt story and wonderful characters who are charming, dramatic, and often hilarious. It sports an amazing cast, again rivaling almost anything Disney put together in the era. Regardless, Prince of Egypt still holds up as one of the greatest animated features of all time. Honourable mention. While this video focuses on the era's theatrical output, it would be remiss of me not to briefly spotlight the direct-to-video Joseph, King of Dreams. Telling the tale of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, this is a spiritual prequel and companion piece to Prince of Egypt. In the vein of Disney's direct-to-video features of the era, Joseph takes on a minimal budget and lesser animation, far less epic or lavish than its predecessor. However, the animation is actually quite good and far better than any of Disney's DTV fare. The storytelling is great and, much like Prince of Egypt, is faithful and respectful to source. It features imaginative visuals, particularly in dream sequences, and sports a great cast, including Ben Affleck and Mark Hamill. Its music, however, is awful, and there is some wonky, primitive CG animation on display. But for what it's worth, Joseph is a worthy installment in DreamWorks canon. 3. Chicken Run. For their third feature, DreamWorks paired up with British stop-motion pioneers Aardman Animation for what will be the first of 3 feature film collaborations, bringing to the table the same kind of zany characters and wacky adventures as seen in their Wallace and Gromit shorts. Aardman assisted DreamWorks in delivering one of the most fun and exciting animated adventures ever. Built as a spoof of classic escape films and as a respectful homage to them, Chicken Run is an energetic, action-driven caper, loaded with fun action-adventure sequences, over-the-top gag pieces, hilarious puns and quips, classic memorable lines, and a coop full of heart. Aardman's artistic achievements are also absolutely stellar, making for one of the greatest stop-motion features of all time. 2. Shrek. For their 4th release, DreamWorks squared up to Disney head-on, directly spoofing their then 70-year-old fairy tale formula. Brimming with absolutely every parody possible and a ton of on-the-nose, snide uppercuts to the House of Mouse, Shrek was a brave and daring breath of fresh air, daring to do what no other animation studio had before. 20 years on, Shrek holds up very well, still as hilarious, relevant, and irreverent as ever. There's a ton of mature themes and humour in here which are a blast to discover for the first time as an adult, proving it a movie which continually transcends generations. But most notably, the film's heartfelt story and messages are still pertinent today. For one of the first CG animated films, the graphics somehow still hold up too. Loaded with belly laughs, a swamp full of memorable lines, enormous heart and soul, and some of the best animated characters ever, Shrek remains a masterpiece of cinema. Yes, seriously. However, coming in as my #1 movie of DreamWorks' first era, Shrek 2. With this sequel, quite seriously one of the best ever, DreamWorks delivered a multi-layered, deeply emotional story that perfectly extends the lore, characters, and narrative of the first while introducing franchise favourite characters. A wider scope allows wonderful character development, delving even further into the messages and morals featured in the first. Down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.